Hello, and welcome to the lesson today. It's going to be a lot of fun, but I'm going to start with a warning that this topic is not for the weak-minded or fragile-hearted, because it's going to dissolve a lot of illusions and it's going to burst your fantasy bubble. So you're going to probably undergo a big catharsis of realizing how all of these systems work together. What I speak about is how astrology, philosophy, psychology, human design, how all of these systems are integrated and used to understand the undergoing current we're currently experiencing as society, as people, which is identity crisis. Behind a lot of ongoing psychological issues, there's one common denominator that I've observed. And what many experience is what I like to call the pandemic of identity crisis, which in a way was also highly influenced by the pandemic of 2020. The real pandemic was not really COVID. The real pandemic was the awareness that we're in a big shithole of identity crisis. Let's see what identity crisis is by definition. By definition, identity crisis is a period of uncertainty or confusion in a person's life. And that period of uncertainty or confusion is normally when we go through a change that is triggered from external sources that we don't feel prepared for. And what that change or experience normally causes is for us to feel insecure, doubtful, uncertain, fearful, and confused about your over purpose and place in life. And what are the three most common questions we subconsciously ask ourselves when we are in this space of identity crisis, which we don't really define when we're actually there? So the first question we normally ask ourselves is, who am I? What kind of person I am? The second question is, why me? You start questioning your personality traits and the way you perceive yourself. Third question is, what's my purpose and what's my passion? You start wondering, what am I here to do and to accomplish? And even if you don't ask yourself these questions, these periods for a lot of people can be very long periods of time. Normally these periods, they can last anywhere from a few years to a lifetime. And the way they are present in our life is when diagnosed with something that's like a mental disorder. Most commonly, the first experience of identity crisis starts around the time you're a teenager. And a lot of the times that's when we go through a lot of big changes and transformations that come to our awareness that something just does not feel right. The sad thing is there are so many people that actually never recover from it and live their whole life with these kind of mental disorders. And most often this identity crisis period, if you go to a therapist or a healthcare professional, they would very much likely describe it as some sort of a mental condition such as schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, or some kind of depression. So for different people, it starts playing out in a different way psychologically. But the root cause for all of that is what I'm going to speak about: identity crisis, where identity crisis comes from, and also what are the ways to go about with treating periods of identity crisis, and how all of these systems like therapies, meditations, astrology, psychology, human design play out into the whole picture of identity crisis and finding ways to deal with that. And what happens during those periods of identity crisis is that you start feeling very intense feelings and emotions of anxiety, uncertainty, obsessions, guilt, shame. And since these feelings and emotions are so powerful, when we don't have the understanding of where this is coming from, it starts becoming something that's very difficult to manage over time. And the more time we live with these feelings and emotions, then it starts becoming a much more serious psychological problem. Since the root cause of that is being a misperception of your own identity, this is why I really want to focus today of explaining where that's coming from and how to go about developing and start nurturing the true identity. The correlation between identity crisis and mental health or mental health disorders is so strongly interconnected, and I feel like there is not much awareness to how and why, and I want to explain how both things in symbiosis work together. So even if you're somebody who doesn't have a therapist, doesn't understand astrology, knows nothing about these different modalities and therapies and how to go about understanding and connecting to your own self, and all of this information out there about personal development and growth, I want to combine all of that in an easy, explainable way that have a very clear picture of how things work. Because once you have the clear, bigger picture of what piece of the puzzle plays into the whole, you can then pick and choose the pieces of puzzles that will fit in your picture. What pieces of the whole puzzle are missing in your life. This way, you're going to be much better able to navigate to what you need and not spend years or a whole lifetime dealing with mental disorders. Since personally I use astrology as one of the tools that helps me create that mental clarity and picture, I'm going to include that today into the presentation. But again, you don't have to know anything about astrology. It will be something that's very easy to follow for anyone. And if you need more basic understanding about certain things that I speak about, I'm sure you can find them on the internet, or you can always ask questions. But this method will be very easy for everyone or anyone to understand, and how to go about solving it, which I like to call the cure. Or to add in some human design terminology, this is what I like to call, it's the function of the reflector aura into the whole system. But at the end, I'm going to speak more about how each aura plays a part into working towards solving this pandemic of identity crisis. Okay, so now I would like for us to start with a very simple and basic understanding of who we are. And for this part, I'm going to use a little bit more astrology. Again, you don't have to know any knowledge about planets and all of these things. Each planet pretty much symbolizes something. All of that information can be referred to different terminologies in psychology, philosophy, etc. So it's a very easily understandable language. So now let's start with this. Who am I? Who am I? Who are you? So we are our soul, which in astrology is represented by the moon, and we are a spirit. We're soul and spirit. In astrology, this is represented by the sun sign in your chart. So if we're soul and spirit, we are soul and we are spirit. This is what we are. But we have, again, these words, they also have in astrology a meaning, which I'm going to include in this presentation, because I use astrology for the purpose of getting to understand each individual and how these symbols or planets play out in their life, of who they are, and getting an understanding of the whole picture. But in very simple terms, we are soul and spirit, and we have body, which in astrology is represented by Saturn, and we have mind, which in astrology is represented by Mercury, our mind. Again, we're soul and spirit, and we have body and mind. We're not body and mind. We have that. but we are this. Just to add some extra flavor, to explain the whole picture, and in case you're interested to look at your chart and understand what each planet or symbol means, how do these other planets play a part? With Venus is what we like. Mars is how we like to go about things, our drive. So I'm going to write our drive. And then we have Jupiter, which is happiness, what gives us external, I want to specify this, external happiness, what gives us a meaning outside of us. This right here is what gives us inner happiness, inner joy, inner peace, whatever you want to call it. Making this happy, we feel happy. If we go by Jupiter, this is something that makes us happy on the outside. It is influenced by external sources. I'm going to repeat this one more time because I feel like it's super important to understand that we are this. We're soul and spirit. So we need to make happy what we are, not what we have. That's where a lot of misconceptions come from. We try to make happy what we have, our mind and body, and not what we are. So let's make the difference between the two. We are soul and spirit. We have body and mind. These are not the most important factors right now. Now let's take a deeper look at the soul and the spirit and understanding them both and how they work together. In astrology, or in general, the moon is the feminine energy within us, and the sun, or the spirit, is the masculine. The moon also speak about our mother, the relationship with our mother, so the relationship with our femininity. And the masculine speaks about our relationship with our father. And this is not gender related. We all have feminine and masculine energy. So our soul, this is our subconscious, something that we're not aware of, emotional, sensitive, feminine side. This is our feminine energy. It's subconscious, it's emotional, it's sensitive. These words will better help you understand what it is. It's our needs, our deeper emotional needs. Since the mother, she's the figure of nurturing and care, what we need care for, nurturance. You nurture and care needs, and you express spirit. And our spirit, or the sun in our astrological chart, it is our ego, our desire, pride, what we want. It is how we express our desires. This is to live in spirit, being able to express our desires. But what's the difference between healthy ego and hurt ego? A healthy ego can only be developed when the emotional needs are met. A hurt ego, which majority operate from, is when we don't have our emotional needs fulfilled. I'll put the emotional needs as the moon sign. So this is when they're hurt, and this is when they're fulfilled. Since our wants and desires are something that comes more into our conscious mind, we're something that we're more aware of. where when it comes down to our subconscious needs, it's not something that we're mentally aware of. So our healthy ego has a healthy, it's connected to the soul. But with hurt ego, this is when you are disconnected from yourself, from your soul. You are disconnected from your needs. Only once they're connected, when the ego is expressed in a way that's connected to your needs, you can find true happiness and be happy when actually your wants and desires are accomplished and fulfilled. And this is operating from a place of awareness, from what I like to call what I like to call in a healthy expression is SID, secure identity. This is the formation of secure identity. It's a healthy ego, an ego that's connected to your own soul's needs. SID. So where do things go down the drain? And how identity crisis comes into play. So now that we understand the basics and who we are, we can always go back to our natal chart and look at those placements of our sun and moon placements. But how is identity crisis developed? So we come, like we said, we're soul and spirit. We come into this lifetime. An alien comes into this earth plane. Now you have a mother and a father. I mean, that's why if you're an orphan, you have much more difficult time, because even if your mother and father shape a wrong identity about you, since you still have a connection to your parents, they're still more likely to at least pinpoint some things about you that are true and correct for you. It's difficult when you're an orphan because you don't have any of these references. So here you have a mother and a father. So how is your identity shaped? Now your identity, your alien identity, or what I like to call AIDS. So this stands for, no, I don't say alien identity, but I call it adaptation identity. And you understand why. Now this identity is shaped by the beliefs your mother and father have about you. So once you start growing up, they tell you you're this, you're that, you're good at this, you're good at that, you need this, you need that. And some of these beliefs and needs are also influenced by their own perceptions, by their own experiences, by their own fears. They are not you, who you are. This identity 8 is shaped by 2 other individuals. They have their own moon and they have their own sun. So they have their own SIDs. A lot of cases they don't even live into their correct identity. So I would say there's 2 more 8s. So there's 2 adaptive identities creating a 3rd adaptive identity. So 8 is who we are told we are. But what happens and why this identity crisis a lot of times becomes apparent in teenage years? Since then, the brain starts becoming more developed and having a mind on its own. Also here, since the adaptation identity, it influences our thoughts, our mind. And we said our mind is Mercury, right? It influences how we think. So adaptation identity influences how we think about ourselves. But our mind, it does not tell us who we are. That's why the mind can be very misleading, because the mind in upbringing, it's influenced by external identities, external sources. It's not influenced by you. Mind is something that's developed. You have it, and it develops over time. So now this program becomes ingrained in our mind, in our mental perception of who we are. So now we think we are the adapted identity. So all of our decisions from at this point in our life, they're a reflection. All of our decisions or thoughts, they're a reflection of our adapted identity. This is who we identify to be. And our thoughts and decisions are surrounded by living up to that identity. You know, your parents tell you you're beautiful, or you're stupid, or you're great at some, you have this quality or that quality. So now this becomes ingrained and shapes your thoughts and decisions. So you start living your life living up to that identity, to what it's shaped, what you adapted, what is formed about who you are. But as we grow, we start living more and more outside of the home environment, out of our relationships with our immediate family and caregivers and parents. So we have 8, and then we start growing, and then here life happens. So as we experience life, and you oftentimes even hear teenagers say, give me more space, I want more space. Space allows growth. Mental space allows growth. And when there is space, the mind has the ability to realize certain things. And what happens during this period of space? Now, certain people, things start telling you different things. Then you start questioning, or they start noticing things in you that don't have much to deal with that identity of what your parents tell you. So now you start questioning, hold on, is that really me, or is that not me? And a lot of times what happens in teenage years is the first time you fall in love. We'll speak about that later. But when you fall in love with qualities in you that you see now through another person. And when you fall in love, you start realizing things about yourself that you were unaware of until that moment. That's why a lot of times when you fall in love, you're kind of acting out in crazy ways, because you start finding out things about yourself that you've never experienced before, you never knew before about yourself. And you could start becoming rebellious because you're rebelling against that identity, because you cannot associate with that anymore. You have found a new way of thinking, of being, of doing things. So now you start experiencing, in that period of space between your adapted identity and SID, secure identity, being realized, before creating awareness around your secure identity and adapted identity, that space is what we call identity crisis. An identity crisis is when your child, since we said Mercury is the mind, it's the child, and the child's mind is formed by the parents. Now the child in you, the inner child, in that space, it has a realization that there are discrepancies between the adapted identity and of where they're looking at the newly found, I would even call it newly found identity, but they still haven't understood what their security identity, they still haven't gotten to a place of understanding, who am I? So now they're somewhere in space between, I don't really fully associate myself with what I've been told until this point of who am I. I've discovered new things about me. So now I'm just feeling confused, and you start developing anxieties, fears, and not understanding all of these emotions that are coming up within you, which are the result of these discrepancies you're experiencing. And these discrepancies, they can create very strong feelings when unaware of how to deal with them. Very strong feelings of guilt, shame. Hold on, my parents told me I'm this way, but this is not how I feel like I am. So now you start feeling guilty. But is it possible for me to be any other way? And then if I don't live up to my adapted identity, and let's say you grow up in an environment where your parents disapprove of the things that you have discovered about yourself because you don't live up to their belief of who you are, and instill even more fear and guilt and shame within you, all of these deep emotions start playing out eventually as some sort of mental disorder. Even if it's something that's not clinically diagnosed, it starts psychologically, on a very deep psychological level, affecting you. Again, they're all related to what I like to call identity crisis, pretty much. And when we experience identity crisis, our mind, our inner child, since it doesn't have a connection to its, we said SID, secure identity, is when you have awareness of who you are, which is your emotions, emotional needs, and your ego, desires, your spirit. When your mind doesn't have connection to your emotional needs, it's only connected to your adaptation needs, you have difficult time of, you realize something is not right, but you have difficult time of understanding how to deal with these emotions. What is coming from where? Why am I feeling this way? And this is what mentally, mind, psychologically starts affecting you. And what's psychologically, mentally affecting you is a contradiction right now in feelings and emotions that you're experiencing, and the thoughts and beliefs that you have formed in your mind. There starts being, this is what I call discrepancies, these contradictions. This is what creates all of these feelings also of anxiety and guilt and shame and etc. And why is it so important for you to understand what your needs are and being able to regulate and cope and deal with all of these emotional fluctuations? Because there could be not just once, different periods in your lifetime where you could experience identity crisis. Why do you need to know your core emotional needs? You need to understand what your core emotional needs are, because only this way you can express a healthy ego. Not a hurt ego, a healthy ego. We first need to create emotional stability in order for us to be happy with what we desire, what we want, with how we express our spirit, our ego. So we're still not evolutionary wise as a whole evolved to a point of healthy ego assertion. We're still right now in that identity crisis period where we need to deal with our emotional needs. And when we speak about love, since the sun is ruled by Leo, and Leo is the sign of love, as a whole, in general, we're still not evolved to a place where we understand and can feel what love is, what true love is, and express that. Because true love is felt and is expressed through a healthy ego. If we don't know what we emotionally need, if you don't know what you emotionally need and are able to deal with these emotions, and you're in a period of identity crisis, you're not able to receive and give love. Now this is gonna go to a different topic, which I'm gonna do a separate video that goes more into relationships. But this, the identity crisis, is what affects relationships as well. First, it reflects your own relationship with yourself, but in general, it's also what affects your relationships with others. So SID, in having awareness around our SID, our secure identity of who we are, becomes our foundation. It becomes necessity. It becomes as necessary, that awareness becomes as necessary as you're able to eat, breathe, think. It becomes a necessity. This is why I speak about it and surround a lot of my work around it, because it is necessary. It's not something that's from egoistical perspective. For a lot of times when people say you take care of yourself, that's egoistic. No. That becomes necessity. That's a foundation. It's a need for everyone to attend to, because otherwise it becomes a psychological problem becomes an identity crisis. So I call this sit is the foundation. For those who do invest the time and are consistent in trying to understand and create more awareness about who they are, what they need, strive to create self-awareness in order to be able to better cope and deal with these discrepancies between their emotions and their thoughts, and not project those discrepancies onto their partners. These that don't understand that this is the foundation and think it's egoistic are usually narcissists. What we like to call, or in psychology, what are usually called people with narcissistic tendencies or narcissistic disorders. Because when we look at this whole system and what narcissism actually is, narcissist is somebody who identifies themselves only with their adapted identity. So when we look at people with narcissistic tendencies or narcissism, these kind of people, they hold on to that adapted identity and need constant external validation for maintaining that false identity, because to maintain something that's false requires a lot of energy, and it needs a lot of external sources to keep fueling that fire of false identity. Now I'm going to take this whiteboard out, and I want us to take a look at what are some ways we go about creating awareness on who we are. So how do we deal with the discrepancies in our emotions and thoughts which cause identity crisis? So what are ways we play around with our mind that help us get to a place of awareness and understanding of who we are? Again, which in my services I represent, and when I speak about the cure, that's what the cure is. The reflection, the correct reflection of your identity, of your SID. One way creating awareness of who we are is through meditation, visualization. This is where all the spiritual practices come into play. Like I said at the beginning of the video, everything, astrology, meditations, human design, therapies, psychologists, all of these things, they all have a role and a play in the whole system. So now I want to explain what their role is, what the part is, and how they all together fit into the full picture, into the full puzzle. Another way we go about creating awareness of who we are is through therapies, psychologists. Like when you experience identity crisis, a lot of time people start going to therapists, psychologists, even astrologists, or human design, family constellations. Sorry, my handwriting is probably not the most understandable, but anyway, I say it. These are some other tools people use to understand the period of identity crisis, creating awareness to what's going on, and the end goal is still self-awareness. Why am I feeling this way? How do I deal with these discrepancies of thoughts and emotions? And how do I get to understand who am I? This here is more on a mental way. I put Mercury. This meditation, visualization, spirituality, therapies, all of these things, they deal more with on a mental level, creating awareness. How do we create awareness more on a physical level, which is the body, which is represented by Saturn, which the symbolism of Saturn, the grandfather of time, which also symbolizes karma. Our karma, we're here to play out. So these are words used left and right in different books and literature and knowledge. I'm trying to put them all together into one thing. My system, I look fresh. My end goal is to make sense out of all of these modalities and words, and again, how they play a part in the whole picture. You have an understanding of their individual role and what these words actually mean. Okay, so what is the third way we create awareness? That's something that is called falling in love. Because falling in love creates change in brain chemicals. All of these three things that help with creating awareness. One common thing is that they need consistency and time for that awareness. Meaning that if you meditate 2 days for 10 minutes, you're not gonna become more aware. Neither if you go twice to a therapist. That's why there is not much progress, because people try out these concepts here and there, but for something to get to the point of awareness, you cannot just try it out here and there and practice for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. The true awareness is not some meditative state where everything is peaceful and nice and beautiful and perfect. When awareness hits, it's painful. Realization, when you go through identity crisis and you start realizing your true identity and that illusion you lived in from the adapted identity, that realization, it feels very painful. So unless you get to that point of feeling destruction of your old way of thinking and realizing who you actually are, which it's the catharsis, that the realization moment, the enlightenment, the epiphany, whatever you want to call it, there is no awareness. Awareness of self. That's why we fear falling in love, because the awareness of self, it's not something that's always enjoyable. It can be very hurtful for our old ways of thinking, of our old ways of being in an illusion of believing, etc. But only through awareness of self you can start integrating awareness of self, the illusion of your adapted identity. That's what awareness of self is. And to live in your secure identity, you need to integrate that self, that awareness of your new self. You need to integrate it in your life. Once you're able to integrate that, your secure identity in life, then you're able to feel, experience, and give love. Because now you feel and give love from a secure identity, which, as I said earlier, it's when your ego has a connection to your emotions, to your soul. Everything else, it's living in an illusion. That's why falling in love is a lot of times people associate it with pain and suffering. That's not love. And it's associated with pain and suffering for the sole reason that in order for falling in love to be transformed and understood of what the purpose and meaning of love is, it also needs consistency and time and intimacy. Falling in love is not love, like feeling love and experiencing love. Unless it creates awareness of the self, yourself is integrated, and then you come from a place where you could feel and give love. Because the process of falling in love, you fall in love through the other with parts of yourself reflected back to you that you have not yet integrated. The purpose is of falling in love is learning what true love is and learning how to love. Whoops. To integrate the purpose of falling in love is to integrate those truths about yourself that you still haven't understood or expressed or lived through in your mind about who you really are. That's the whole purpose of it. Otherwise, you would not need other people. You would not need to fall in love. But how falling in love can become also a source of identity crisis. Because as much as it could be a trigger for healing, it can also be a trigger for identity crisis, and that's what we fear. We fear that trigger because it creates, like I said, change and brain chemicals. It's a big change. And when I spoke earlier about that identity crisis most often happens in teenage years, because a lot of times for the first time when you fall in love is usually when you're in that age range, when you're a teenager. If there is no consistency around being with the person you fall in love with and creating that intimacy and understanding those parts about yourself and integrating them in your life and cultivating that practice of love, it leads to developing mental illness. And what is the mental illness? It's the fantasy. You fear falling in love. You start living in a mental fantasy, and that mental fantasy is fueled by obsessive, compulsive, intrusive thoughts, very powerful thoughts, lacking in awareness of yourself still. The moment you create awareness of yourself, that fantasy, those illusions, those intrusive thoughts, they will dissolve. But those parts are still not integrated. You're still not a place of feeling love. So now you're becoming love sick or mentally sick. You know, there is a lot of different ways you can go about naming it, and a lot of different words you can use in terminology. It's all one and the same thing. So when those parts are not integrated and you don't learn to love yourself in a way that you express those newly found realizations about who you are and how you behave in that intimate interaction or relationship, you're not capable of truly feeling love, to love your needs, the needs of that newly realized identity of who you are. That's you. Like I said, other people, they're just mirrors, they're just reflections. But the whole point of those mirrors or reflections in people is for that single purpose of showing you this is who you are. This is why, again, we fall in love with people and with qualities that we have, but we still haven't expressed. So by you cultivating these qualities and that identity of who you are and nurturing that and loving that about yourself and understanding that that's not the other person, that's actually your own needs, and through the other, your needs is being fulfilled in a healthy way, not in an egoistical way, but in a healthy way, in an intimate way, then you become a part of the matrix. And the matrix is the mental entrapment that time has stopped. It's the fear of falling in love, which causes identity crisis when there is no connection between your thoughts and your feelings, or not no connection, but there is discrepancies between what you're thinking and what you're feeling. You might be feeling afraid, but you think you want to, or the other way around, but all the discrepancies, when it's not in synchronicity and that's not nurtured and cared for, it puts you right away in the mental entrapment of illusion in the matrix. Because to fall in love with someone, it's pretty much the same as you fall in love with what you truly need. What you truly need to feel love and happiness, and what I said before about inner joy, inner happiness, not Jupiter. Jupiter is external happiness. That inner happiness of who you are. If you don't know who you are, you technically and love yourself and that sit in that secure identity about you, there you don't really know. I mean, when you hear motivational speeches, love yourself, care about yourself, you become lost in that whole matrix of who do I love? Who do I care for? Actually, I feel like it instills even more guilt and shame because you're trying to mentally figure out that, but you can't. It's not an answer that could be just mentally derived. You cannot think about that answer. So for me, I even found these certain motivational speeches. I understand where they come from, and they're very helpful. Love yourself, care for yourself, but only when you know who you are. When you don't know who you are, they can create a lot of anxiety, a lot of pressure because all of the information out there in the media is kind of geared towards that, live from your soul, love yourself. But when you don't know who you are, that's something that's very, very difficult. Because as people, the end goal is to fall in love and to be our secure identity. So this is ourselves, this is who we are, to be that. Because only when we're that, we can give and express love from our truest place, from our most authentic place. This is where all of these words, true and authenticity, come from this. And until we have this awareness, what did I say? Falling in love and creating this awareness, it comes with time, which is Saturn, which is maturity. Until we get to that mature stage, we're still operating from a place of child. We're still kids. And when you're kids need love. They still don't understand it. They are love. They're lovable, they're cute, they're sweet, but they're not able to give it in a mature way. They're children, so they need it. They just need love from their parents. So this is the formation of what in psychology, it's called narcissism. I need love. I want you to love me. But I'm not able to give it yet. This is when there is identity awareness. You're able to give mature love. If there is no identity awareness and you're not feeling fulfilled and aware of yourself, majority of people are right here. So that's why it's so common, the whole thing about narcissism and narcissists and disorders and becoming in narcissistic relationships. I would say both victim and abusers have these qualities. So they end up attracting each other. And this is where love, or the illusion of love, the fantasy, it also causes a lot of mental distress, psychological distress. That's why relationships with narcissists cause psychological distress. Because both parties still are not at a place of self-awareness. And what is it to love yourself? It's to love your needs, your emotional needs. And when both people are in love and get to a place where they love now who they found they are to be, and what they're actually, and have awareness of what their emotional needs actually are, now you're at a place of creating that's you, one, and then we have two emotional needs. Now you're able to get to a place of where creating a healthy relationship. When we're here, you start having what I like to call a compatibility agreement. I mean, this is something that's communicating. Okay, now I know what your needs are. I know what my needs are. Or you know what my needs are. And now you're seeing that, okay, we can attend to each other's emotional needs. And this is what creates a healthy relationship. But this, even though there is awareness, this relationship then can be moved on to the next level and can be sustained through love by agreeing to nurture and care for each other's emotional needs. Agree to nurture and care for each other's emotional needs. And do you see I use the word agree? You don't force people to love you. You cannot force people to love you. When there is an agreement, I agree to nurture and care for your needs, and the other person agrees to nurture and care for your needs. It's an agreement. This is a want. Love is a free choice. This is not something you can force somebody to do or control them. This is a free choice. I love me and I love you, and that's why I choose to do that. And I speak about this because there are so many misconceptions about the whole word love. I mean, so many times I've been told by people, I love you. No, you don't love me, because you don't choose to care about what I say that I need. You only love me if there's conditions, if I attend to your needs, but that should be my choice if I love you, not because you want me to, or you want to control me, or you force me to. Because you want me to attend to your needs, that doesn't mean you love me. You love me if you're willing to attend to my emotional needs, and I'm willing to attend to your emotional needs. Then you get to a place of compatibility and then healthy relationship. Everything else is narcissism. I don't have to attend to your emotional needs, neither do you. But you do it because you choose to, because you love the other person, and you can. I mean, that's why you choose to, because you can. You know what their needs are, and you're willing to attend to them. It comes with willingness. That's where love becomes something integrated into a relationship on daily basis. It becomes a responsibility, but a responsibility doesn't feel like a burden when it's your choice. It feels like a burden when you have to, when it's controlled, and that's not your choice. That's when it feels like a burden. That's where a lot of relationships start feeling heavy and fall apart. But that's not love. The feeling of love is, yes, it's responsibility and it's consistency and it takes time and it's something that's buildable, but only when it's a choice, a personal choice, and a personal choice that's rooted in awareness. And also, when love comes from a place of want is desire. That's a healthy ego. I desire to love you, not I have to. And that desire also plays a part in, so we have compatibility, love. I mean, so this section would be relationship, and how identity crisis, and how awareness plays a part in identity crisis through falling in love and then building a relationship, if you want to follow the structure this way. So we have compatibility, love, and then we have chemistry. Chemistry is also something that you cannot control. Chemistry, it's the desire, the friction that's built through constant change and transformation in intimacy. But that's also something that you cannot control. As you see, when it comes down to relationship, none of these factors, there is a control factor in it. Everything is a free choice. Love is a free choice. Compatibility, I mean, there is communication in it, so it's an agreement if I choose to attend to your needs or not. And same thing with chemistry. The whole point I speak about this is because I want to dissolve all of the illusions about identity, relationship, and what pretty much causes all of these psychological issues that many experience nowadays with the pandemic of identity crisis. Because it does not just affect you, it affects you personally, yes, but it affects everyone around you, and in general everybody's ability to create healthy relationships. And when we speak about desire, also the more you connect or have this consistent practice of connecting to yourself and connecting to your secure identity and what your needs are, and fulfill those emotional needs, this is how you create a more whole sense of feeling within yourself. And that's what creates more desire. like people who are desirable, they have more a sense of, I know what my needs are and I attend to my needs, and that's not in a selfish way. Narcissists view it in a selfish way because narcissists still cannot let go and hold on to their adapted identity, an identity based on illusion, in that child mindset. Now, once you get to a place of living in your secure identity, you become a butterfly. You emerge from that cocoon and are happily ready to fly. And from that point, you can start fulfilling purpose, mission, and all of these other wonderful things you're here to be and do in this lifetime. Your purpose is not just to be emotionally stable. That's the stepping stone. That's why I speak about it. It's the foundation. Unless you get to that place, being able to live a life that has a meaning and purpose and fulfilling some mission, it's not possible. You might have a great career and have opportunities there and be financially well off, or live up to somebody's idea or expectation of where you need to be. But in order to have a personal mission and fulfillment and success, and live from a place which is correct for you, you need to have the foundation, the connection to your emotional needs, and express those. And I speak about all of this, not just information that I've been in research for over the years, not from just astrological standpoint and knowledge, or observations in general about relationships, others, my personal ones, but also from, yes, a personal realization and awareness about how all of this plays out. I'll give a personal example. When I fell in love for the first time, I was 16 and a half, and now having this mental understanding of what works, how I could connect the dots of when I was experiencing more difficult periods of time, and understanding then who I am actually, and so on. But when I fell in love, I actually fell in love, yes, with the other person, but the qualities that I discovered, or that I thought I fell in love with him about, that I also had them inside of me, I just never expressed or gave life to. Or, for example, we traveled a lot, we had a lot of different friend circles, we communicated about a lot of things together. It was very dynamic and fun and lively, energetic energy. And since I never lived that out, I just thought I could only be that way and live out these things through him or with him. So when you lose that sense of I found myself with him, and then never lived it out, and lost that whole sense of who I am, since that relationship, he was overseas, so that had to end. And I fell into a deep depression. And then it took me years, through a lot of failed relationships, where I would still look for the same qualities because I really loved myself in that relationship and who I am with that person. But since that person was no longer in my life, I lived for years in identity crisis. That's why falling in love is something so fearful. When, let's say, you're at a young age, or your parents choose who you need to be with and you don't live that out, and creates that mental thought of something to be feared for. And then after a lot of failed relationships, including marriage, I realized that yes, I have all of these qualities within me that I never gave life to. And it's not so much about the other person, it's not about that you can't fall in love again, as long as you can cultivate these qualities within yourself. Now that I have the awareness, I more and more start cultivating or attending to that identity of me, who I am, and who I love being with another person. But if there is not another person, that should still not stop me from expressing them, which led me to actually create this lesson today in my car. Because yes, I love traveling, I love being in a car. Thank God I kept the car after my divorce. I just have 2 tickets to pay for it, but anyway. So but then you start making decisions and choices that feel correct for you. And as it weird as it sounds, the whole point in the end of the day is to make decisions and choices that fulfill you, because only from that place, regardless of being in a relationship or not, you can feel like a whole and complete and fulfilled human being. And now, to add, last but not least, how human design plays into this whole picture. As I said earlier, since Reflector and Manifestor aura, they're external auras, the reflectors, they reflect back what your secure, if somebody is living in their secure identity. And hence, that's why reflectors are normally experiencing surprise when they're around people with secure identity, and a lot of times they feel disappointment when they're around people, which is majority, or around people or situations that operate from a place of adaptive identity. It's a surprise when somebody is in their alignment, in their truest self-expression. So let's make more reflectors happy and live from a place of secure identity. With manifestors, which I'm one, by the way, in their correct energy, because I've also been a manifestor that doesn't operate in my correct energy. Manifestors have inborn ability to connect to this. And a lot of times that's why manifestors are isolated and they're called lone wolves, and not easily influenced by external sources, because they have a very strong connection to this. And a lot of times in my life I've been called a rebel, because no matter how much I try to live up to some adapted identity, there is a part of me that just knows it's not true, so I would rebel, which would cause chaos and disturbance for everyone else around me. I would not be able to verbalize it or understand it or express it, but that would be it. I would be the uncomfortable molecule into the whole picture that moves all the pieces around. Because no matter what is expected or wanted of me in one way, shape, or form, at the end of the day, this is what I feel most connected to. My secure identity, my needs. And again, it's not in a selfish way when what's interactions I'm with, and it's something I've observed over the years, don't feel true to this. That would create a lot of uncomfortable experiences and interactions for other people with me. Same thing if somebody comes to me and they're operating from a place of not their choice identity or adapted identity, I could sense that, and I feel the incorrectness from their intentions, which internally would cause also anger within me. Now I have all of the awareness and able to understand and cope all with that, but which would fuel that anger and unconsciously create actions that will disrupt their illusion. So in turn, that creates upsetness or anger also, or some kind of disturbance in the other person, where they would not like my way of reacting, which was, again, that's why it's difficult to inform, because it's very unconscious for manifestors, which would trigger the other person to step outside of their illusion of their adapted identity of who they are playing out to be, but they're not technically. So this is why Reflector and Manifestor aura have this external influence or play in the whole picture. Generator aura is, for me, it's more about working towards maintaining and sustaining that nurturing, that secure identity. Because to nurture that secure identity, which it's something that I deal with my work more in what I call the third and final stage, the medicine, there is also physical objects, because every physical object, it has an energy. Same thing with colors and furnitures, if we're speaking about the home, the environment that you create around you. So generators, their role from human design perspective is to nurture. They have the force to create the things, the physical things, to nurture that secure identity, to work towards building that. And projector's aura, it's more about guiding. So it's still working towards building that secure identity, but more from a guidance perspective. So when you have a lot of therapists, psychologists, astrologists, all of these people, they usually come in the form of projectors, where they know how to guide you in nurturing that identity, that secure identity, and getting to the core of who you are. So the projector and generator, or they're more internally focused, where the manifestor and reflector, or they're more externally have more of an external effect. That part I'm not sure if I'm fully able to I understand it, to verbalize it correctly. I hope you understand it. If not, let me know. I'll try to go more in depth, because or give me your explanations. How do you see it now that you see this structure and model? How do you see from human design perspective? I have some knowledge. This comes more from a place of feeling into it. But I'll probably want some projector. I'll be curious to see how, if you watch this video, would you say the different type auras fit into this whole, I would say, life awareness cycle, which in a way catalyzes the cure for this pandemic of identity crisis. So I'm gonna end this here. I'm curious to hear your thoughts or experiences of being in a period of identity crisis, and how do you relate to this information. That would be interesting for me to hear more about from you. And yep, I'll see you in the next video. I think we're gonna go dive deeper more into the whole fantasy versus reality matrix kind of deal. If you have something in particular of interest that you would like me to more in depth explore and speak about, I'll be happy to do it. Just let me know, and I'll see you next time. Bye. It's what I like to call Independence Day, because Independence Day only comes when you are in your secure identity and you're yourself. Otherwise, there is no freaking Independence Day. You want to get Independence Day? That's how you get Independence Day, by being yourself. Okay, I'm done rambling. Bye.